Oh, that sounds good. Wow, that's crazy. What is it? Assembled from tested components, complete system not tested. No, you don't say. So that hole, that's supposed to have a screw in it. The motherboard's not even in. HDMI completely obstructed. USB is unusable here. A couple weeks ago, we set forth on a quest to find a pre-built gaming PC that can actually be used out of box by anybody, and that provides overall good value, but more importantly, is built well and runs as it should out of box. Thus far, we haven't found one. And now iBUYPOWER is here to change all of that by getting a super F. There's no greater F that can be received in grading than what iBUYPOWER has managed to get here. Before that, this video is brought to you by Squarespace. We use Squarespace for our own GN store and juggle complex multi-piece orders all the time with it. Squarespace makes it fast for us to roll out new products with detailed pages full of galleries, videos, and descriptors. It's also useful for your own resume sites, for photographer or project portfolios, or for starting your new small business idea. There's never been a better time to try and start your new business than right now. And we can vouch that Squarespace makes it easy. Visit squarespace.com/gamersnexus to get 10% off your first purchase with Squarespace. So this is the iBUYPOWER Slate MR1004. We bought it from a retailer along with the other two systems that we've already reviewed at this point. Those videos are on the channel and they're linked below if you'd like to check them out. And we have some more coming in. This one was $680. The Cyberpower one was $1,050, Dell was $900, and the next two systems that are coming in, we've got one that, actually three. We have one that was $1,800, one that was $2,000, and another one that was about $1,000. So this will set the floor, and the $680 mark is a good mark to hit. That's the price point where you can still play games on a computer. It's not too low end, and it's something that's much more affordable than, say, the $2,000 boxes that we've got coming in as well. And by the way, a quick, huge thank you to all of you who've bought stuff from us on store.gamersnexus.net, like our mouse pads, including these two new ones that are in stock and shipping now, and of course our mod mats, mouse mats, shirts, and everything else we sell in the store, because it's those sales that make it a lot easier for us to buy this kind of stuff. And, well, the $2,000 ones especially, and just commit to reviewing them and putting out a good review for you. So this thing has a promising price point, and the components at the price point are not too bad. They're certainly not as out of line with value as the Cyberpower one, which was it's a bit rough for $1,050. But it's a GTX 1650. It's got an i3 10105 and one stick of RAM at 8 gigabytes. So that's about the floor in terms of an entry point to PC gaming. As we've said a few times now, we are genuinely really trying to find a good pre-built to recommend for a number of reasons. One is because it's easier to get a pre-built right now than components individually in some cases. Another one is that, like many of you probably are, we are at GN, pretty much everyone here is the personal IT for their friends and family. And so if you're watching this, you know how to build computers, you've done it before, cool. Hopefully this series is helpful to you when you need to recommend a pre-built so that you don't have to become the dedicated IT for a computer you maybe have built for someone. So that's why we're trying to find recommendations for our own purposes as well. And the next systems we have coming in, we have specifically searched for, and we asked our community for recommendations so that we could try and get something in that clears the hurdles. But this one is not going to do it today. We have a huge list of issues, both software and hardware, with the iBUYPOWER Slate MR. We'll start with the teardown and with the hardware. It's bad. It's just not good. Let's get started. So this one has arrived with some shipping problems, and we'll tell you why in a second. It's really obvious. But from exterior, we instantly have concerns of thermals. There's no airflow here. You will not find any. There is one tiny hole here, so maybe that's it. iBUYPOWER, for whatever reason, has decided to put not just two, or not even three, but four 120 millimeter fans on this $680-ish computer with an i3 and a GPU that we'll look at in a second. And perhaps they've chosen 4 fans for this because the front is entirely glass. There's no way for air to get in here. There's just not a lot of depth there, and there's a whole lot of plastic, and then there's a filter behind it, and there's a filter in front of it. This is insane. What are you doing? All right, check this out. So there's a lot of plastic for the grill, right? That chews at some of the air potential, flow potential. And then there's a filter here, metal filter. And then we have the fans with a filter. We've got double filters, which is always bad for airflow, and a bunch of glass with a tiny hole. And the best part is that they've done this filter because they have this hole, because this wouldn't be filtered by the side. In the very least, they should have just committed and closed off this entire thing. At least I could then respect their commitment to suffocating it. Oh, here's some rolling screws. Wow. Is something gonna fall on my head? Is it all screwed down? So instantly I see where the noise of loose screws is from, at least one part of it. So if you look up here, so that hole, that's supposed to have a screw in it. The motherboard's not even in. There is a way to prevent this. You can't just write it off as shipping damage and call it a day. They could have done better here. Perhaps if they had taken some of the cost for their completely, utterly useless fans that are obstructed by glass anyway, they could have packed it better. You can see that it's obstructed. HDMI, completely obstructed. USB is unusable here. That one is unusable. You're gonna have a hard time getting an RJ45 in and out of there. So this whole thing is already instant failing grade. iBUYPOWER has failed before it's even been turned on. And the reason this is completely preventable, and they're being cheap, they could have shipped this thing with one of these, but they didn't. This is from Cyberpower. Cyberpower used this in the $1,050 system we bought from them. All of these, again, bought through a retailer, but packed by iBUYPOWER, Cyber, so forth. And if iBuy had packed this thing so that the GPU wasn't, wow, that's not even in the slot, is it? Wasn't just going to leverage the system into, I mean, first of all, the screws shouldn't really be able to come out that easily, but the GPU is clearly leveraging it all out of place. This is why I said we're gonna have to fix it up a bit before powering it on. So again, this will come off after testing. Okay, so there's the problem. We're having trouble getting a great shot of it, but you can see that the pins for the video card PCIe slot are not actually in the slot on the motherboard. It's been ripped out. It's just hanging here. So this is one, there's a risk that with a little more shipping damage, it could have torqued the hell out of the PCIe slot on the card and broken it. But two, if a user tries to turn this on, it will not boot, and they'd be lucky if it doesn't short. Something in the system with screws floating around, with the device halfway plugged in, there's a risk that there's a direct short at some point, and you lose a component as a result of that, and then the whole thing would just be a brick. Where do I even start with this? Wow. Holy shit. Look at that thing. Not this. Look below it. Wow. That's crazy. Some good that did, huh? This PCIe slot reinforcement. There you go. Hard at work. This thing incurred some insane damage. Props to whomever was handling this thing when shipping it, considering they hulked through it across the truck when they loaded it. But that's still not an excuse for iBUYPOWER, because there's a lot of ways around this. Number one is better packaging inside the system. The video card could have been removed, and there could have been a 3-step instruction booklet for the user for how to get that back in there. It's not much different than their other instructions that say to flip the PSU switch and set it to 115 volts or whatever based on where you live. So that one would have prevented this. It's not a hard thing for the user to fix. Not ideal, because then they can't use it out of box, but I mean, you can't use this out of box either. I've actually never seen that before. The clips that grab the foot for the PCIe slot, they're all gone. Is that what's shaking around? Let's find the loose parts. Well, other than the video card. Oh, there's one. That look familiar? Is it? All right, well, we'll maybe find a screw at some point, but for now we've got that, which belongs here, and there's actually, all the other ones are missing. I don't know. I've mended it. So how that is so in there? How does that happen? there's a lack of care, lack of attention to detail, and somebody put so little thought into packing this thing that it's causing, this is significant damage for them. If a customer had this, one, a part could die. Two, you could have just an RMA where it's going back and then coming back to the user. So you're express shipping it 2 ways. That doesn't seem economical. But anyway, let's look at the cabling. So 24 pin is cable routed. Credit there, I guess. In the same way you'd give credit to a car for its base metal value. The USB cable, is it glued in? No, wow. I'm proud of you, iBUYPOWER. So if you want to grab one of our mod mats that we're using to protect our table from all of these PCs as we work on them, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net and grab one of the work surfaces. Okay, well, I was going to go get the last screw out, but it's already been pre-removed for me. One thing I didn't mention, this cable was like this, so it's hanging loose right in front of the fan. And this iBUYPOWER, this needs to be secured somewhere. Doesn't matter if it's just a simple zip tie or you route it or whatever, but hold it down because there's a good chance it's going to end up getting sucked into the fan and just dragging or causing the fan to stop at some point, depending on how the user moves it around when they're deploying the system. Oh wow, we have problems in the back too, but let's look at the motherboard first. The USB slot is actually a little bit damaged. It would need to be, it wouldn't be difficult. You'd have to push it back into place. Pull that, that is in the correct slot. That's the most we can ask for. The memory is 3000 megahertz, 16, 18, 18, 38. Take a look at that PCIe slot. That's insane. Oh, the plastic's actually really chewed up too. I'm actually starting to wonder if this was partly an installation issue, not just a shipping issue. And the reason is the way the metal and the plastic is bent and damaged around the slot. Looks like someone really violently pushed this thing down. I'm wondering if maybe that caused some damage that was pushed over the limit with shipping. Does this move? A little bit of wiggle, but not too much. Not as much as Cyberpower. I think I keep coming back to the same problem that I had with Dell, which is I wish these SIs would just have a little bit of pride. Wow, that's not even in. Oh, come on, guys. What the fuck are you doing? I want to put these two back the way they were. So check this out. I haven't done anything to this one yet. What I'm going to do is turn the screwdriver to the right and tighten it. It shouldn't spin, but oh man, can it spin. That was quite a bit of movement for something out of the assembly line. Like that's not enough pressure. How's this one? This one's all the way down. So what that means is we're going to have fully torqued corners everywhere except here. And if we were to do a pressure map in exactly that installation like we did with the Cyberpower system, then what you would see is lack of coverage up here. You can see a real serious lack in mounting pressure over on the sides, but particularly on this left side where we had screws that weren't all the way in. So that's how you know there's a problem. Look at that. iBUYPOWER is just maybe there needs to be more training or more quality control or something, but we're loose on these screws over here. It's not a consistent problem. That's my problem with this. It's inconsistent, and that means that whoever's managing the production of this can't predict what the problems are going to be when they're doing QC. So they just have to look at everything, and there's not enough time for that. This screw's loose, right? That screw's kind of loose. These are tighter all the way down. You've got a missing screw up here when it was shipped to us, which means it probably wasn't tight all the way. And then you've got this one over here that they torqued the hell out of because you can see the screw ripped off the paint on the PCB and we've got exposed copper. It's not going to short anything because it's just a screwed into a ground plated through hole, but like total inconsistency here. Listen to that thing. That's so light. There's like nothing in there. All right, we've got a good one. Good one today. We have a Raid Max RX 400 XT. Caution, hazardous area. Oh yes, I would say so. I would say this whole computer was a hazard. So check this out. So basically, we just noticed this, but when you connect the power cable into the power supply, there's a lot of flex in there from this really thin stamped steel. Here's where bad gets worse. So after all of that, after reassembling the thing, we really had to work to fix this computer. First of all, we deserve a partial refund for doing the assembly work on behalf of iBUYPOWER. We didn't know that they would ship us a box of parts where the box of parts was literally the case box with the parts in it floating around. But here it is. So we reached out to iBUYPOWER as an anonymous customer. Remember, we bought this retail. They don't know who we are. And so we reached out, sent an email, and it's now been the better part of a week, and we've had 0 response. And our email was very simple. We basically said, my computer is not turning on. I just bought a computer from insert retail store here, and it's not turning on. I don't know a lot about computers, but here's some symptoms. Please help. Thank you. And we left the obviously important contact information. No response. 0. That's even worse than the NZXT Undercover BLD support test that we put them through about a year or 2 ago. At least NZXT responded. Incompetently, but they responded. iBUYPOWER is not even that far. So this thing doesn't even deserve the benchmarks we're going to give to it, but we're going to do them anyway because we recognize that we probably just got extraordinarily lucky and iBUYPOWER got extraordinarily unlucky, or this is a major problem. But either way, the computer is capable of running software if it boots, and so we fixed it to run the software and see if it provides any value when it is fixed. So after fixing the PCIe slot, prying metal out of the USB ports, and pulling loose screws out of the case, by the way, we found the missing one. It was in the dust filter. Once we finally got it booted, iBUYPOWER's warning about the system not being tested as assembled became even more obvious. BIOS had the memory set to 2133 megahertz. This is actually even worse than just not enabling XMP, because Intel's official spec for the i3-10105 would allow for 2666 megahertz. They don't even go that far. 2133 out of box is just bad. That's like the speed from when DDR4 had just launched in about 2014. The board and the CPU combo allow for XMP and for manually increasing the memory frequency, so it's even more disappointing that this was skipped over. Like the other pre-builts, there's 1 stick of RAM in this. That's not as offensive as 1 stick of RAM in a $1,050 system from Cyberpower, but we'd obviously prefer to get use out of the CPU's dual-channel IMC with 2 sticks. At least in this instance, though, the computer is cheap enough to where we can kind of overlook that issue. As for other problems, we had 1 cold boot where the case fans didn't spin up at all. This is a little bit scary because although the system turns on without the fans moving, there's a decent chance that an uninformed user who doesn't notice this could run the computer hotter than intentional. Upon further inspection, we believe it has to do with the fan hub on the backside or the connection quality. A reboot eventually fixed this, but it's a problem that they need a hard solution for. Cyberpower had a great hard copy manual and a digital manual with very clearly spelled out instructions for purchasers who don't know much about computers. This is an important step for a pre-built. They need to have that hand-holding step to make sure everything's done properly. It reduces RMAs, reduces support requests, and gets everyone running smoothly. iBUYPOWER did not include a hard copy quick start guide. It didn't even include a QR code to a digital guide, and it didn't include a URL for a digital guide for setup. So you're just shoved into the deep end, except the deep end is shark infested, and there's corpses of video cards and PCIe slots that have sunk into the bottom. And finally, before we get into the testing data, we also noticed some problems with the peripherals. Namely, the mouse doesn't left click. It's the squishiest click we've ever experienced. Take a listen to it yourself. The left mouse button even occasionally has to be manually dislodged from the switch cavity in order to use it again. We've seen the first mouse ever made in the Computer History Museum, the one made out of a block of wood and with the red button on it. And that thing still works better than this one. Patrick and I can both commit that this is, impressively, the worst mouse that either of us has ever used. All right, time for the benchmarks. We'll cut over to the benchmarks now, starting with our pressure testing. We used chemical paper and our pressure analysis tools to produce this pseudo-color image, which shows the mounting pressure gradient for the cooler. As delivered, the pressure was somewhat lacking in the top, as expected, and the result was weaker in contact with IHS. However, overall, this cooler actually does have better pressure than most cheap coolers. The trouble, of course, is that it's not all about the pressure and the contact of the IHS, because the cooler still lacks any copper and meaningful surface area, so although the pressure is surprisingly good, the cooler remains minimally effective. It's good that this is just an i3 though. That's sort of the saving grace here, because it's just not that much power consumption in the CPU for the cooler to need to deal with. We'll look at thermals after the gaming performance. For gaming performance, as always, we'll remind you that all of these numbers are predicated mostly on the GPU and the CPU, and to some extent the RAM, but not the OEM or the SI. The OEM and the SI decisions impact performance, but they don't make the silicon level parts. Anything from thermals to bloatware can hurt operation. If you just want to know the performance of the CPU or the GPU on its own in a vacuum or a standardized bench, check out our reviews of the individual parts for the unrestricted performance without the other decisions affecting that. Starting with Cyberpunk 2077 and using our standardized 1080p medium settings, the iBUYPOWER system ran at about 39 FPS average with the stock configuration, improving by a somewhat large 4.4% with XMP enabled manually. That's a lot of performance to leave on the table. The system allows Dell a lead of 38% when compared to the clean 54 FPS average, although this is reduced with bloatware and all the other stuff running. The Cyberpower system is the most salvageable from these two competitors from a parts perspective, and it increases the frame rate by 62% in exchange for 54% more money. That's not a bad deal considering the overall uplift, but the Cyberpower system does need a new cooler, so that puts us closer to a less exciting $1 for roughly 1 percentage point improvement. iBUYPOWER's Slate MR could play this game, but settings would need a hard reduction here. Combat further will hinder the frame time consistency, so this is one where you'll struggle a little bit more than some of the other games. Hitman 3 shows the insane difference that memory can make. We ran and reran these tests for verification, and we ended up with the same results. So here's how they break down. First, Dell's system lags behind as a result of two things. The primary is the memory module being used is one module, like the rest of these, except not only is it a single DIMM, but it's a single DIMM that's running with just 4 memory chips, and it's at low speeds with loose timings. Secondly, the McAfee services seem to really hate Hitman 3, including the background services that stay in place even in our reduced bloatware testing. The iBUYPOWER system is able to lead Dell with thanks to its lack of bloatware and its use of better memory, at least one stick of it. Dell could improve a lot, though, if it got rid of the background services that persist even when bloatware is killed, as seen by our limited 37 FPS average maximum range. iBUYPOWER also has a lot of room to improve. We saw an uplift in this game of 20%. That's not the first time we've seen so much uplift from a memory change, but it's not as common as the smaller 5 to 10% improvements from enabling XMP. iBUYPOWER really hurt its performance here by leaving XMP disabled in this specific game, and that's especially disappointing since it's just a simple BIOS toggle. Dell, however, looks even worse here than previously, so there's some perspective for you. In Red Dead 2, which is mostly GPU bound, the iBUYPOWER system falls back to where it makes more sense, at the bottom of the stack since it's the cheapest, and that's thanks to its 1650. The card isn't able to support this game at the same frame rates as the two with the 1660 Super, unsurprisingly, and so you'd probably have to drop the graphic settings to compensate. Cyberpower holds a 43% advantage in this one, so it doesn't look as advantaged as in Cyberpunk. Rainbow Six Siege has comically high frame rates, so all of these systems are objectively good performers here, just some are relatively higher. In this instance, Cyberpower's $1,050 computer holds about a 41% advantage over iBUYPOWER's $680 system. Dell is all over the place between an 11% and a 26% uplift. These systems could also handle Rainbow Six Siege at ultra settings at 1440p. So there's a bit of a gateway here to higher resolution gaming, but you're not going to be able to do this on all of the games. Noise testing is up now. In this testing, and measured at 20 inches distance from the front of the system, iBUYPOWER instantly establishes a higher idle noise level than its two competitors that we tested. In our 26 dB noise floor environment, Dell starts at around 32 decibels, with Cyberpower and iBUYPOWER both at 36 when idle. Where iBUYPOWER breaks away is under load. The system ramps the fans pretty hard here, climbing to 44 decibels. It's loud. This could run a lot quieter if the CPU and the GPU ran cooler. but that'd require more expensive parts or a more open case or a mix of both. Here's a quick power consumption benchmark. We normally run tests at the EPS, 12 volt or PCIe cables for components, but we only care about system power draw for this one because they are pre-built computers. The iBUYPOWER system is unsurprisingly among the lowest for power consumption, and that's because it's just an i3 with a 1650. Dell is next, with post-tau numbers showing a bit of a drop in Blender as a result of the boosting limits in BIOS, and then Cyberpower consumes the most power, but it of course offers the most performance. Thermals are up now, tested it in a controlled environment. We ran only 2 sequences of tests for this one with the front panel and one without, both running a combined CPU and GPU workload. The CPU ran at 84 degrees Celsius stock, or 77 without the front panel. 84 is fine in the sense that it's not close to thermal throttling, so that's good, but it's a poor result for something that is as low power as an Intel i3. In the very least, though, running a stock cooler is actually acceptable in this instance, so we can let iBUYPOWER get away with this one. You just have to make sure that you, as the user, clean out any dust every couple months just to make sure there's no performance degradation, because you don't have a lot of thermal headroom here to clog it up with dust. GPU thermals were also fine. Despite the constrictive front panel, all of these components are low enough power that they're not in any real risk of running too hot. The box doesn't heat up that much. There is one aspect that changed here. Leaving the GPU fan curve to auto for this test was one of our uncontrolled elements, and that's because, again, system ships this way, so we wanted to see how it would do. The GPU fan speed did drop a little bit by about 160 RPM, so it would actually run cooler if we locked the fan speeds. But what this tells us is that there's room to bring the noise levels down because the fan RPM comes down even if it's on an auto curve. So this shows us that there's the reduction we need in noise levels if iBUYPOWER opened up the case with a better design. So that's it for the review. The biggest problems, other than the hardware, were again support. If you skipped through to the end here, go watch the section about support, because the key takeaway there is that even if we're giving iBUYPOWER a pass for some of these problems, there needs to be support there. That's what you're paying for. The whole point of a pre-built is someone else builds it, which that has not worked out, and someone else handles support, and we're still waiting. Again, better part of a week on that for a response. And you want a pre-built for the consolidation of warranties, where now you have one point of contact for everything. And just there's nothing here that gives us any indication of a sign of intelligence on whatever planet iBUYPOWER lives on. So, you know, iBUYPOWER, you had a chance here. It's really not a bad price given the market compared to some of the other prices we've seen, where people are selling systems. There was one we were looking at the other day, it was $1,600 and it had a GTX 1660 in it. That's utterly insane, and it's shocking that people are willing to pay that much for it. But in this case, it's a 1650, it's an i3. Yes, it's a bit expensive still, and a lot of the cost is wasted on things like all this glass that's actually just worse than not having it, and 4 RGB fans that are completely unnecessary. But look, the thermals are okay because it's an i3 and it's a 1650. The power consumption is very low, the heat output's very low, so even with a poor design like this one, they're all right. And that seems to be the biggest thing that all these OEMs and SIs we've tested so far get stuck on. iBUYPOWER got past that part. That's good, and it's $680. That's also relatively not a bad starting point compared to some of the others. So they had all the ingredients to make a good product, but it just all got fumbled somewhere in multiple ways. And we can't forgive it, because even if we forgive one aspect of it, there's too many other hard failing grades where there's drivers that are missing, there's no support, it's shipped in pieces, not by design, and they can't even set BIOS to the Intel spec for memory, not even XMP. So that's it for this one. Unfortunately, we have yet to find a good pre-built, but we spent a lot of money just recently desperately trying to find a good one, because we don't want the whole series to be negative. So we're trying hard. Hopefully one of the next ones will not disappoint us. They look promising, but for now, even if you weren't going to buy this system and you bought one of the more expensive iBUYPOWER ones, our biggest concern is that you won't have support, because they didn't answer us, and they don't even know how much money we spent on it. We didn't tell them which specific model we got, just that it doesn't turn on and we bought it. So this isn't like, oh, they spent too little, they don't clear the support tier thing. It's just getting ignored, and that's unacceptable. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, you can subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly. and help fund our next pre-builds. And we'll see you all next time.